Good morning and welcome to Sunrise. I am Alero Edu.
It's a beautiful Saturday morning.
Wet.
A wet one, traffic-laden one.
Oh, God.
Am I
What
evacuating?
a way to start the weekend.
Oh, well, the weekend started yesterday.
It was bad yesterday
for
as well.
those who are in Lagos and environs, they would know what I'm talking about. A trip of, say, 15, 20 minutes took me something in the region of 3-4 hours yesterday. And it's only due to the fact that the expressway has been, given a facelift.
And it hadn't even rained yet.
No, hadn't.
Well, so today, factor in the rain.
And I don't even know how it so happened yesterday, Alero, that almost, well, I don't know what happened around Badagry. I don't know what happened around Ekpe. But I can say for...
It was everywhere.
It was...
Well, it was a Friday.
So?
Some Fridays are like that. It's like everybody's just deciding to go in one direction at the same time. But I hear that yesterday was in all directions.
It was like, when the spirit of traffic wants to come to the city of Lagos, it just unleashed its army. Oh. That's the way it seemed yesterday. There was someone, a friend of mine, who is claustrophobic, was in her car alone for so long, she fell sick. That's just a summary of it.
Oh, dear.
And even though she was all by herself in the car, it was just throwing up like God knows what. So, I don't know, but there's nothing anyone could have done about that.
Well, that's Lagos traffic for you. If you live in Lagos and you give traffic as an excuse for going late to an appointment, then you don't live in Lagos.
And now another leg of that is because in the name of traffic, people commit traffic offenses, run the red lights, and all those things. And there are those who are saying, I don't know if you saw those pictures that were making the rounds in the city of Lagos, was it last week or this week, showing cameras on those street lights, on those traffic lights. The fear of traffic offense in Lagos is the beginning of wisdom.
I am thrilled. I welcome those cameras because some people just drive like they are, well, let me not use the word that's in my mind. Let me leave that word out for today. But I guess that the only way to bring sanity onto Lagos roads is traffic offenders get to pay for their offenses.
And what's interesting, how does that even happen? If you run the red lights, no officer is going to chase you.
No. Just a recording.
Yeah, and they wait for you. In fact, I saw on Twitter, was it this morning, someone said, one of his relatives, and I think an uncle or something, ran the red lights in a hurry to get to a party. As soon as he sat down, he received a text that he owes 20,000 naira.
Oh my God.
For running the red light.
Oh boy.
So I wonder how the semo will taste in his mouth.
Well, talking about money, I'm sure you heard yesterday about the central bank releasing money. Some of the monies that have been trapped or that were trapped.
Out of the $464
million dollars owed to foreign airlines or to airlines.
Yeah, $265 million have been released.
More than half has been done. So come on, guys.
Oh, really? Come on, guys. Really? Because there are so many legs to it. First of all, what happened? How come it had to take so long?
Well, Nigeria is short of foreign exchange. Full stop. That's my simplistic way of answering that question.
Let's imagine, for all it's worth, that Nigeria is short of foreign exchange, and we were told hitherto that we had just about less than $1 million or so
in foreign reserves.
Now foreign reserve,
and 376 or something,
and we could come up with
$265
million now to pay those we were not supposed to owe in the first place. what happened? What informed the fact that their monies had to be stuck in our system? Wasn't it supposed to be automation such that, I mean, it goes out just, it's like a
As
conduit.
it comes in, it's going out to them.
It's not like a water sink where you have to plug the hose or something. It's something, I don't know, well, maybe, I don't know, as you said, maybe let me also be as simplistic as you. It's supposed to just flow, right? So what caused the clog that stopped the water, the currency from flowing? I think that needs to be investigated.
That cog, well, part of that cog has now been removed. So some has flowed through. We hope that the entire cog will be removed so that it just keeps flowing through as it is supposed to.
You know, my challenge with this, Alero, is, do we even have an idea the reverberating effects that this has already?
Well, the immediate one is that airlines are now saying that to go to London, which is a 6-hour flight, they're going to charge you about 3 million naira.
In pounds or in dollars?
Well, they'll charge you in dollars, but it comes to the equivalent of like...
So they don't even care about your naira
3 million.
anymore. That's what it's...
4 million.
That's just one. And what's going to happen to other foreign investors that we've been wanting to bring in? FDI, we'll call it.
They ain't coming.
See?
They got other places to look at.
So I think those are the things that we should look at and make sure that this kind of thing, we don't continue to allow it. Because
as surely as we insist on importing toothpicks, these are the kinds of things that are going to happen to us.
Let's just imagine that that's not happening anymore. Please.
The ASU strike. Is there any end in sight? 6 months on, we're still on this matter. Our children are still at home. I saw a documentary, not long, a feature, where some of them have even said they don't even want to go back to school because they have found other ways of occupying themselves and they are making a living. So they say now that school is not that important to them anymore. See where we have pushed our children to.
I don't know where to begin. Again, every time I think about issues like this, I just think about the future. I think about 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Now, someone whose course ought to have ended in 4 years, some have had to be extended to 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. If it's a medical student, for instance, someone who is supposed to study for, like, say, 6 years or so, may
finish in 8 years.
In 8, sometimes even 10 years. So
Ouch.
if we look at all of these reverberating effects, no wonder, or little wonder then, that we're losing the best brains in the country.
Yeah.
Now, I saw something online yesterday of a young lady. This lady couldn't be up to 40. Was a professor, advice, running things, as we say, on the streets in Lagos, in the US, in a university in the US. She's a professor. So if we do not see education as something useful to us, let's make it clear. I mean, let's just come out and say, okay, we don't need education.
And let the children just sit at home.
No, let's...
And go and trade or something at 5.
If we say we don't need education, okay, at least, so what else? What are the options? Then the people will go for it. But let's be clear. After all, the people in Southwest Nigeria say, before the corn, chickens fed on something. So before education came, there was something that Africans were using, right? So if that's what we want to opt for, let's opt for it.
Let's say it.
Let's be clear. I mean, I saw another some article saying that 40 years ago, or maybe a little over 40 years ago, where China is today is where Nigeria and China were at par 40 years ago. Look at China, look at us now. So those are the things.
Now we're borrowing money from them, getting technology from them.
From that same area. So
ouch.
Let's just be clear what we want to do, what we want to achieve. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Because, for me, my fear is we're building, whether we like it or not, we are building towards the future. Whether we are doing something actively or passively. A lecturer told me recently.
Can we use the word building?
We are building. Someone said to me in a class that I attended, whether you play office politics actively or passively. You are
You're
playing
playing
politics.
politics.
So whether we are doing something about education or not doing anything about education, we are doing
We are
something.
doing
We
something.
will reap the benefits. So what kind of benefits do we want to reap?
Ouch.
I think let it just be clear to us.
Whew. Now, put that way, it kind of hurts.
But that's
It
it's just the
hurts.
reality.
It hurts.
It's
It
just the
hurts.
reality of it.
It hurts. And quickly, before we go to the menu, where can one renew vehicle licenses now? Do you happen to know?
Well,
Because I know that we used to do that at the banks, but now the banks don't do it anymore.
I really don't know, but anytime, but who are the people that usually check my papers?
Road
VIO,
safety.
road safety. So I just ask them, man, help me. So usually when you want to take all this, it's usually in their offices and all of that. So, but one good thing about the MOT certificate, roadworthiness certificate,
Yeah.
your vehicle has to be checked, not the money that you pay for it.
Benny.
So,
I remember the boss, explained that to us the other day.
they don't check vehicles in, what's that word again?
In absentia.
In absentia.
Benny. You can't shave a man. You can't test a car behind its back.
No, you can't check it virtually. You can't do it by Zoom.
The car has to be physically present.
Unless you yourself are driving it by Zoom.
Yes, we're going to start today by looking at...
Okay, let me help her. Going straight to the menu this morning, we'll begin with, of course, you've seen that one as well, the political horse trading. Meetings have moved, Nigerian political meetings have moved to different parts of the world at different times. But so beyond all of that, towards 2023, as the first topic.
And then we'll look at developing Nigeria's production prowess.
After all,
right now, do we have any?
Exactly. After all, some people have said that we need to develop, if we're able to produce, we're able to raise money, and then we're able to employ more people. So then we'll be looking at lifestyle, plan for positive mental health. You said some people drive somehow the other time. What makes some people drive in some ways that got anything to do with mental health? I don't know. Just that.
We shall ask the specialist when he comes in this morning. And then we shall close with the Artist of the Week segment, as is normal on Sunrise. And we're going to have one of Nigeria's oldest and topmost comedians with us.
Hopefully he's able to make it.
Oops.
Because, he's you know him. You know him. So that's the lineup for today.
Get your cocoa. Or your cocoa. Or your cocoa.
Yes, get your cocoa. We're two people here. Get your cup of cocoa. Cocoa. As for the cocoa, I don't know about that one because we'll be right back after now.
Okay, things are warming up for 2023.
And it's all cool,
For now.
Things are warming up and it's all cool.
But from September, well, sometime in September, when the campaigns begin in earnest, then we will begin to see wonder, wonder. And we shall begin to hear wonder, wonder. Well, we know that 4 governors arrived in Nigeria yesterday from...
out of the country.
Abroad. They have said it's Paris. They have said it's London. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that they were somewhere and they had meetings with the APC presidential candidate, the Labour Party presidential candidate, and the PDP presidential candidate, even though before they came and had that press conference, there were denials and denials by their handlers. Well, eventually we heard the truth last night. They are back. They had that press conference at the airport when they arrived in Port Harcourt. And they didn't say much, did they? They had those meetings, but we don't know the outcome of those meetings. So we shall speculate a bit. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Ademola Abbas, who's Professor of International Law and Global Security Expert. Good morning, Prof, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
We shall be joined by Mr. Curtis Adigba, who is a legal practitioner and director, International Association of Political Consultants. But in the meantime, we have Prof. So, Prof, following from my introduction, so these meetings happened somewhere overseas, and these governors came back and had a press conference. I'm sure as a professor of international law, all kinds of things would have gone through your mind about what could they possibly have discussed over there? Any thoughts about what could have happened? Do you think any horse trading took place?
Thank you very much. Once again, good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Alero. Look, sometimes you wish you had a crystal ball to just gaze into it and come up with a specific and very definitive response to such questions. One, whether there was any horse trading indeed, whether any significant thing came out of it, is like staring into the sky, to be honest with you, because nobody knows what goes on in the head of these people. But what is important to me, and I think we should actually focus a bit on that, is number one, I worry a bit about the venue of all these meetings. In the 50s, when Nigeria was preparing for independence, we had a lot of meetings in London and what have you. And that was because colonial activities and, of the colonies and the protectorates were coordinated in London. And even after that, you had meetings in London by politicians from Nigeria and the Commonwealth, because that is the headquarters of Commonwealth. What I don't understand is why we always think, our so-called leaders always think that they must fly out to Dubai, they must fly out to London or to Paris before they can have meetings on what is supposed to be Nigeria's national interest. Don't we have venues that can host them in Nigeria? Before you even go to the level of horse trading, let's leave the horse for now. Let's look at what stable are they using. If there was going to be a horse trading, what stable are they using for this horse? What message are they sending to the world? That we cannot sit here in Nigeria and discuss problems of Nigeria that they want to start to tackle, hopefully, in 2023. Let's spend a couple of minutes on that before we begin to worry about what goes on in the mind of these people, if anything significant goes on in their mind anyway.
Okay. As Alero said the other time, Curtis Adigba has joined us. He's a legal practitioner and a director with the International Association of Political Consultants. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
What's your take on what Prof has said? I mean, there are those who are wondering, it's like the political horse trading has begun. Or as someone put it, I think it was you who said it. I don't know. Someone told me that the political season has opened, and there's a lot of trading going on. The way I usually put it is, the transfer season is still open. Even though I know the last thing.
Is it ever closed in Nigeria? I don't think it's ever closed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they don't have commencement or ending period for movement across political lines in this country. And of course, they always invent reasons why they have to make the move.
Since you mentioned that, do you think that is required? Do you think there has to be some kind of legislation telling us when the window opens and when it should close?
There shouldn't be a window in the first place, except in exceptional circumstance. Politics is dynamic in nature, but the dynamism has to be fitted within a certain corpus of ideology. You join the APC because you believe in the core values that the APC is talking about, or believed in, as the core values of the party. That's the what the party is anchored on. Now, you join the PDP because of what the PDP tells you it's about. You understand? And the ability to quickly transform overnight, like we see in this country, by politicians, speaks to the fact that there's just no ideology in our politics. So politics is about lifting people up. And what we lack in this country is the politics that is about the people. Politics that can lift the people up and lift the country up. What we basically see day to day is politics that can lift these individuals up. And so once your interest is threatened in one place, you then begin to plot a pathway to the other place where you think that it will be much better for you there.
There's something Prof said the other time that you kind of agreed with, he said we needed to talk about the venues of this meeting. How significant is that to you?
I said to a friend a few days ago that if you look at the micro unit that the family is, parents can do something that will take their children generations to be able to solve. And that is what you are saying, effect of colonialism on our leaders who still don't understand. Now, the tragedy about the whole thing is that the places they are running to hold their meetings were built and developed by people like them in their countries. And what they don't understand is that these venues where they hold these meetings are bugged. So these foreign governments already know the directions that the so-called political leaders are about to take in the country. Can you imagine Americans wanting to resolve their political differences or chart the way forward and then come to Nigeria to hold those meetings? How does it even look or sound to them?
No, but Mr. Chiba, recall what their handlers had said.
Yes.
That one went on holiday, one went on a business. It's not as if these meetings were planned to take place in those. They just happened to have bumped into each other and decided to meet, according to the handlers.
They can tell their tales by moonlight, but we are not children, and we understand how these things work. This is not the first time, really, if you understand. The other time, they accidentally met in Istanbul, if you recall. The same set of governors, they met in Istanbul, and then from there, they went to France and to London. At whose cost? The taxpayers, the people themselves. We're talking about some of these states where the civil servants have not been paid, they have been owed. You saw what happened somewhere in the South where people rushing for food. Close to about 50 people died from stampede looking for food. And so, look, I think the political elite in this country do not understand how terrible our situation is. You understand? And because they've gotten away with it over the years, they just believe that it's still their default mode, and the people don't care and can't do anything about it.
Prof, how significantly do these issues that we're talking about play in the build-up to the elections? There are those who are wondering, hey, politicians will always do what they do. They will play politics. But at the end of the day, there are supposed to be decisions. People have to take decisions based on some actions or inaction. So how significantly do you think this whole horse trading, these whole international meetings for local politics play in the decisions or choices that people will make at the end of the day?
Oh, thank you very much, Ayo. That's a very important question. But before I respond to that, let me just say something quickly to what I think Alero joked that, the politicians, the handlers said that they were on holidays. And I think your colleague joked that they just bumped into one another. Well, the offshot is that if they are just on holiday and they bump into one another, then we shouldn't be discussing them as a national issue, which means it's a private discussion, which they had on their holiday. But on a more serious note, then it means they bump into one another when they go to Saudi Arabia, to Mecca, when they go to Dubai, and when they go to London and all those places. So it's very laughable. But what is important, Ayo, is this. The question you asked is an important one. Not because there shouldn't be horse trading, but because of what the horse trading should be aimed at. In any political dispensation, there will be meetings. And I believe there will be windows. Windows will be open, just like football clubs. Of course, it's seasonal. You open the window for transfer and so on and so forth. In politics, because politics affects your life from the day you are born till the day you die. When you are born, you name your child in your house. If you don't get a birth certificate from government, that child is not born. When you marry, if you don't get marriage certificate, it's not recognized that you are married. When you die, even if you don't get death certificate for the deceased person, it's not recognized by. So government affects your life, and to that extent, it is a continuum. It must completely be open forever. There must be judge. There must be discussions. So what we should be worried about is that what are they talking about? Who are talking? And for me, where are they doing the discussion, for goodness sake? That is very important. They must talk about national issues. They must talk about interest, and they must build, compromises. In every civilization in the world, there must be compromises. We know today in Nigeria, even within the same party, whether it be PDP, APC, LP, whatever parties they have, whatever nomenclature they go by, there are differences, there are divergent views. And whether we like it or not, whether we want to deal with these characters or not, some of them are going to become, so to say, national leaders eventually. Whether you believe in LP, whether you believe in APC, PDP, RIP, whatever you believe in at the end of the day, some of their, front runners, some of their people are going to become leaders. So whether we like it or not, we have to engage with them. But when we are engaging with them, we must make it clear to them that, number one, you must put national issues at the forefront. I don't care whether you've gone for a holiday or you've gone for a shopping spree, whatever you go to do, wherever you go. Those things have to be on the front burner. And you must inform the country when you come back. That is, if you go out in the first place, these and these and these are what we discussed.
But from my apologies, Prof. From all that you have seen, there's been a lot of conversation, in the spaces where people can play. Social media, most importantly, and perhaps sometimes on some other media platforms that people can engage. There've been a lot of conversations about, and people are pitching their tents already, making up their minds about one person or the other based on one thing or the other. A lot of fun on social media, a lot of issues that are being discussed. From what you have seen, especially among the electorates, how significantly important are the issues being raised in the public space? Or maybe I should ask it, do you think the people are engaging based on the core issues?
The straightforward answer to that is no. No, because we don't even know what the core issues are from the political stable. That is the issue here.
But we know the issues that affect us.
No, we know the issues that affect us, but the issues have not been projected. They're not being put out by politicians. That's what I'm talking about. Now, you have people who leave this country. Number one, we're not privy to the meetings that they have, wherever they have the meetings for. And as they're having the meeting, on the one hand, their handlers are denying in the first way that the meetings will be taking place. On the other hand, they come back from wherever they go to, and then what do you hear? They don't say much. They don't tell anything anymore. So people now begin to second guess, and that is what we do most of the times. We think we know what the national issues are. No, tell me, before this program came out, when you were doing your introduction, you measured the fact that about $260-something million was being repatriated by CBN to foreign airliners. You ask yourself a question, and which was a question you asked earlier on. Why did we owe them in the first place? Don't you have a national shame? So it means we did have that money in the first place, because you couldn't just wake up and then repatriated $265 million or thereabout, which was about half of what you are in. So what were you waiting for? Now, meanwhile, Nigerians are already second-guessing why foreign airlines were going to pull out, why they were terminating their services in Nigeria, and so on and so forth. But until the CBN actually came out and then did what it did, we didn't know any better. So politicians should be able to come out clear that these are the issues we are discussing. People can then take issues with that, and they can then join issues with them, and we can have a meaningful national debate. But when everything is shrouded in this very sickening secrecy, then we have a problem. And that is why I keep saying that the venue is very, very important. Your last speaker talked about rooms being bugged and this and that. That could very well be. But for me, what is important is leaders should sit here in Nigeria. It's not like I have my money, I want to go and do, what do they call these things nowadays? Destination wedding, destination birthday party, and this and that. These are private issues. But when you are somebody who is in a public office in Nigeria, who wants to govern this country in whatever capacity, be it federal, state, or local government, then you have a duty to Nigerians to let them know what you are discussing, what you are saying, so that we, as ordinary human beings, ordinary Nigerians who are going to vote for you, can then be able to join issues and can make our intentions known. That is the way it is done in every civilized part of the world.
Mr. Shiba, you wanted to say something.
Well, I don't believe that politicians alone should set the agenda. I think the people know what is important and very critical to their daily living. And so they can also set the agenda and force the politicians to tool and talk about the issues that are important to them. Now,
yeah, but Mr. Achigba, Prof, I was going to say this when you were talking, that are we not jumping the gun? The campaigns have not really started, so they're not trying to engage us yet.
the campaign never stopped. Okay, so what is campaign? All right, what is campaign? Even the MBA conference was turned into a campaign venue. So let's not deceive ourselves about a commencement period for the campaign and then a terminal period. We are constantly campaigning. The things you
that
hear...
window is always open.
Yes, that window is always open. It's a 24-hour window.
So is that to say that the lines are blurred, you know, when INEC says there is a particular time limit?
You see, that's for INEC official purpose. But what you see, and the fact is that, like I've always said, that INEC is overburdened with the responsibilities that it has to carry out. INEC can identify some key areas of the electioneering process and handle that more efficiently, like it's done by the Federal Election Commission of America. It doesn't get involved in conducting elections. It monitors how you raise funds, how you spend the money, and the various periodic returns that you have to make and the conduct of politicians. But here, INEC is involved in everything. Even when political parties are meeting, somebody from INEC has to sit in that meeting and all that. And so INEC don't even worry about how dark money is flowing into our politics. And this is where we have the politics that is about some people and not about everybody. So if I bring in $1 billion or $2 billion into the political process in favor of a political party and candidates,
I have a say.
I've already invested.
Yes.
There's a special interest that I have created in that political party. They are not going to start projects that are about you and I. But what kind of projects can bring out the funds that will compensate the investor?
But that's definitely, I don't know how developmental that can be. You are a political consultant. So perhaps you want to, try to give us a perspective of some of the things that are happening. You've heard Prof raise issues about the venue. And you have also heard, you also had an issue with that. You've also heard him talk about, a number of, things that are important and all of that. Give us an understanding. Why would there be a need as a political consultant for meetings to hold in places other than where the elections are going to hold in the first place? And perhaps some other things that are involved in this horse trading, and perhaps how significantly they will play on the elections?
So I think it's about the mindset of those that are involved. And for them, it's also about power display. We have the resources. We can sleep in Lagos today, wake up tomorrow in Paris for breakfast. We have the power, we have the resources. We are not accountable to anybody, right? So we travel out of the state anytime we want to travel. And some of these things they do even without handing over power to their deputies. And that is because we don't hold them accountable. Now, what you see on display is utter disregard for the electorate. When you hear some of our political actors speak, you think that the votes of the people are in their pockets, and they can just pull it out and donate it to whoever they want to give it to. And that is because we have not allowed our politics to evolve around the people, whereby the people themselves can't determine completely who their leaders will be. Do you understand? Now, we have a system whereby a governor who wants to, whose time is up, You understand? We determine who will succeed him. And he does that by bullying everybody that he doesn't want to project and impose his candidate on the people. Do you understand? And because he has the resources and they have the ability to force through their ways, so we come to believe that if you want to win an election, you have to go to the governors. And that is what you see now. But if we have a political system that the people themselves can determine, okay, set the agenda. Look, right now in the US, we're approaching the midterm election in the US. And polling is showing that what is critical to the people are issues of the kitchen and table. How do they put food on the table for their kids? How do they maintain the roofs over their heads? And politicians are forced to start talking about those issues. All right? Now, if we don't get up as the people to say, look, this is where we think the country should be heading to, and then look for people who can take us there, these guys will continue.
What role can the people play in that? The selections are made at the political party level.
Yes,
in the primaries.
See, that's why I said fundamentally our politics is defective. The political parties right now that we have are gated communities. Communities.
Like estates.
Yes. People, those who are already in the party, we have to take you to the gate and give you the code before you can enter. But political parties are supposed to be integrated communities where everybody can join and have a role. You see, you will grow with your talent and contribution to the party. Okay. That's how you rise to the top.
Prof.
I told you before that if Barack Obama were to be in Nigeria, he would be fighting to be a councillor.
Well, yes.
But because you operated in a political ecosystem that recognizes talent, you understand?
But, yes. Okay, no, Prof, is that to say that, I'm sorry, I think I don't know, maybe you had a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Is that to say then, going by what Mr. Adigba has said here, that the defective nature of the political system that we are operating opens the way, so to speak, for some of the defects that you are also talking about, both of you especially?
Well, thank you, Ayo. There is no question about the fact that we are operating a largely defective political system. But look, albeit that is what we've got today, I don't think we are going to be able to do a lot if we focus on what it should have been rather than what it is and what we have now. Look, I understand what the last speaker said regarding when I commented earlier on. By no means was I saying that only politicians should set the agenda. Of course, the people will set the agenda, but you ask yourself the question, which people in Nigeria are going to set the agenda? What platform are they going to use? Students who have been at home for the past 6 months are going to set agenda for education or for students or for universities. NLC that is largely compromised is going to set agenda for workers. Civil society organizations that are running about how they will get the next funding from international donors are going to set the agenda for the country. Whether you like it or not, we operate a system in which the electorate has been captured already. And until we fight, look, you don't stay outside in the rain and fight the rain. You have to find a shadow, find somewhere to put, a safe net over your head before you begin to engage with that. You need to engage with the structure we have today. So you cannot say, oh, people have to set the agenda. And nobody is saying people will not set the agenda, but we are saying we have a structure for now, which does not actually speak to that. And people are saying, look, you are there. We know the issues that we face. We don't have food. There is no employment. Youths are suffering. Universities are short. Schools are suffering. So on and so forth. Infrastructural deficit, so many other things. We know this generally, but where do we channel them to? Whether we like it or not, we have things that we can call political associations in Nigeria today. They are there anyway. The question is, how do we make the best out of them? The gentleman made a reference to the forthcoming, midterm elections in the US. Yes, of course. And people are setting the agenda, but they have structures in the US. They have structures in the UK to set agenda. They have structures in Western democracies. Well, there's no such structures in Nigeria because in Nigeria we build personalities, we do not build strong institutions.
Well, Prof, just on that one very quickly, I think Mr. Adigba has a contrary opinion.
So, Prof, I think we have structure in our politics in Nigeria. If we don't have structure, on what basis are we conducting election? But they are defective structure.
Well, I think what he's talking about, because it's against what you said the other time about we have a structure for the political process, but structures that can make people challenge.
No, they can't challenge. Let me tell you, how do people set agenda in other parts of the world? They punish politicians at the polls, politicians who are not speaking to their interests, who don't care about them. They punish them.
Okay.
Look at it, for instance. ASU has been on strike. Majority of the students are within the dominant demographic that can determine the outcome of election in the country. And people forget so soon that one of the reasons why PDP failed in 2015 was because of the disillusionment of this group of people. They were at home for almost 1 year at some point. They also strike. And they took it into their hands to punish the PDP then. You understand? Now, you can setting an agenda is not just gathering in one place and say, oh, this is what we want you to do. No. You focus the politicians on what your desires and needs are, and if they don't bend to it, you punish them at the polls. So, but
by not employing them.
By not employing them, because they're basically hiring people.
Okay. Prof, what's your take on that?
Look, Ayo, I don't want this to turn into kind of a banter between me and I think we are saying the same thing, but in different ways. Okay. Because there are a lot of issues that we need to untangle here. Yeah. Basically, and I'm happy that you clarified my point for the gentleman. I did not say that political parties don't have structures in Nigeria. I'm talking about structures for people to be able to engage and to be able to actually push the agenda to the national front burner. That's what I'm talking about, that we don't actually have in this country.
Let me ask you this, Prof. As I put it to Mr. Adigba also, you have had to work with a chief executive of a state before, and perhaps there are some things that people don't understand or need to understand better about the workings behind the scene. Most of the time when a governor or a president is working and taking certain decisions that may not be in the people's favor or as expected, there are perhaps some things behind the scene that's not making those decisions easy or possible for this chief executive. You want to give us an inkling, especially speak around some of the issues that you know ought to determine the next set of leaders that we have in the country.
Thank you, Raju. I think we've touched on this in previous times. I remember very well when we talk about, look, accountability is very important. That people will have to hold their leaders accountable, but we use the word accountability in a very laissez-faire manner, in a very generic manner, without actually knowing how to hold our leaders accountable. You know, it's so easy for us to say, look, a party does not do A, so it gets punished. But there are no statistics to actually say that PDP got punished because ASU was on strike. No, there could be a lot of other things that we don't get.
One of the reasons. I didn't say that was the main reason.
And you understand that when a chief executive of a state or government is going to, a national government is going to take decisions, there could be debate. You know, even at the international level, look, you have 15 members in the Security Council of the United Nations, 5 of them permanent, 10 non-permanent. Everybody knows that the way it works in the international sphere is that the Security Council wants to take a very controversial decision, will have got an agreement of all the 5 member states or non-veto of those who are going to dissent anyway, non-veto from them, before to table it. They will have done their meeting. So there is nothing wrong in politicians actually meeting, especially in the pre-formal declaration of campaign season. There is nothing wrong in them in meeting and doing, you know, what, George, or let's meet, let's talk about this and that. Nobody is outlawing that. I talk about the venue to start with. But we talk more importantly about how those discussions are going to affect decisions that will be taken. And you did refer to the fact that I did work for a government in Lagos State, to be precise. And I can tell you for a fact that a lot of decisions that will come to the public, we will have discussed among ourselves internally. We will have looked at the pros and cons of this. And there's so many of them like that. Sometimes you want to take a decision that is going to have a massive impact, you know, on the citizenry. Well, that's within a very short time. On a long term, it's going to be beneficial to them. But the citizenry does not see the benefit, that long-term benefit. They focus on the short-term benefit. And because of that, if you push it to the domain of citizenry straight away, you get a pushback. So I do understand the value in which having all these kind of enclave meetings and conclave meetings here and there. But that does not mean, however, that everything must be shrouded in utmost secrecy. Because if I don't know what you've discussed about, if I don't know what you're talking about, I cannot hold you accountable at the end of the day. That is what I keep. Accountability is the first thing that we need to put on it. And number two, you must look for leaders who are going to build not strong personalities in government, but strong institutions in government. And that is where the argument gets lost. Nigeria is blessed with very strong and powerful politicians, but very weak and completely useless public institutions, democratic institutions. Whether in the US or in the UK, it doesn't matter whether it is a Republican or a Democrat in the US or the Labour Conservative in the UK that win election. Water is going to run, light is going to run, you're going to have light, roads will be. Can you imagine, for instance, let me give you an example in Lagos State here. You are constructing a major road, the only road that links Lagos to the west, to the east, and you are shutting down that road by doing something crazy during the work hours. How do you deal with that? You just refer to that. People spend hours coming into Lagos and sometimes getting out of Lagos just because the government does not think out of the box. Why can't you do your work from, let's say, from 11 p.m. when there'll be less traffic and 6 a.m. when there'll be less traffic? Something tells me that if government wants to construct a road of such nature and they start from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., they will get done within those 8 hours what they will never be able to do in 24 hours. Do we have peace for brains in this country? Do we have spaghetti for brain? We must start asking ourselves some very, very serious questions. That is the need of it. Credibility. You must have accountability. You must have leaders who believe in democratic tenets and who want to build strong institutions, not strong personalities. Enough of that nonsense in Nigeria.
Hello.
Mr. Adiba, there are about 7 or 8 candidates that have put themselves forward. But some have said that the 2023 elections will be a 2-horse race.
Well, I don't know about that.
What do you make of that? There are fringe parties that are making themselves heard big time. And how do you think that is going to affect this whole thing? And what kind of alliances and mergers, do you see any mergers? And what kind of alliances do you see showing up?
I don't see mergers, but I see politicians working across party lines for selfish interests, not basically about helping to unite the country.
You mean anti-party activities
of course, yes,
are going to be evident?
You're going to see a lot of that. But look, beyond what you have said, let's look at the basic foundation of our politics. Prof talked about accountability. At the state level, in almost all the states of this country, there is no accountability. That's the truth of the matter. The House of Assembly is in the pocket of the governors. The state account is their piggy bank. They can spend whatever they want to spend out of it. And that's why they are so powerful, because they have access to these funds and they can do whatever they want. Now, why is the development not around the people? I'll speak to the candidates you talked about. Why is the development not around the people? You have to take a look at the process that produced these leaders, okay? So you have the talent, and later you have the talent, you want to be governor, but you don't have the funds. Ayo doesn't have the talent, but he's the money bag. So Ayo comes to a rescue, or by projecting you.
No, she has to come to me.
Yeah, so you go to Ayo, and then you say, sir, I want to be governor of the state. And he says,
so he finances everything.
Yeah, so what do you have to offer us? And he said, well, I will do whatever you want. So Ayo brings out the billions and then makes you the state governor. You cannot do anything as the governor.
He's my boss.
Ayo is the governor. You are just a placeholder. That's the truth of the matter.
Sorry, I laughed.
That's what we have in basically all the states of the federation.
Oh, God.
And that's why, instead of the government focusing on the people, we the people who elected them to solve our problems now have to solve them as our problems. Because we are constantly looking at how to manage the conflict between them and their political godfathers. That's what you have all over the states.
So the distractions of government,
the first thing
is there.
about accountability that he talked about, you see, you cannot reinvent the wheel. We've seen some of these things dealt with in other parts of the world. Now, they have what is called plural executive in some states in the US, where the governor is elected The deputy governor is elected. It could be on a different political party platform. So you can have a governor who is a Republican and a lieutenant governor who is a Democrat. And then you have commissioners not being appointed by the governors, but going before the people to contest for election themselves. So the governor can remove them. So for instance, if I'm the commissioner for finance, and you as my governor calls me and say, Honorable Commissioner, I want 1 billion in this account. The question I will ask you, why? But if you appointed me as the commissioner,
can't ask any
I can't ask you
questions.
that question.
You just say yes, sir.
So instead of taking time to reform our politics, because you see, people talk about institutions. Institutions are built by people, and institutions are defended by people because they can't defend themselves. So we have to build a process that is constantly reforming to bring it to best standard and to work for the people. Now, let me come to your question then. Traditional politicians believe that those with better name ID, that's identification, bigger political structure, are always the one that will win election. And in our country today, we have two political parties that fits that mode. The PDP with about 14 states, if you include Osun State, and then the APC with about 21. Now, go back to 2015, and you will see that what we have just done is to flip the script. The PDP had more states in 2015, but they lost the election when politicians came together under the umbrella of APC. Why? Because the people were disenchanted with the prevailing atmosphere, political, economic, and social atmosphere at that time. So why people are saying, okay, we have two horse race, all right? And it could well be, but there is a storm that is gathering in this country. And I don't want people to discount that casually like they have done in the past. When in 2006, a young man with a funny name, skinny, never been heard of except in 2004 when he gave that speech at the DNC, stood at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Springfield, Illinois, and declared and said, I want to be president. Nobody took him seriously. Say it was a long shot. But you know, the strength of every politician is the people. And as long as we keep thinking that what determines the strength of politics in our nation is how much you've been able to pilfer from public resources and then use it as a war chest. I want Nigerians to know that we're approaching a time. With the era of the social media, people are beginning to think more about themselves and beginning to know things that they didn't know about before. You can go home feeling comfortable about your two horses, but open your eyes to the danger.
There is a horse in the stable.
There's a horse that has not emerged from the stable, but it's coming.
That might just spring out and surprise everybody.
So let's not go to bed to sleep. We all need to work around the clock. The parties need to work and earn the votes of the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Curtis Adigwa, legal practitioner and director, International Association of Political Consultants, who was with us in the studio, and we also had Professor Ademola Abbas, Professor of International Law and Global Security Expert, who joined us virtually. Thank you, both gentlemen.
Thank you
for coming to talk about this with us today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sunrise will return in just a moment. Make sure you're there when we come back.
Thank you for staying with us. The next conversation is around, as you've seen in the welcoming slide, first of all, let's ask a few questions of ourselves this morning. Why do we have dwindling resources and meager income? Of course, the challenge remains, as so many people have spoken about over time. Let's just go straight into it because, you know, in 2017, there was this book launched. I don't know if you're aware of it. title of the book, From Consumption to Production. It was actually launched by the Vice President. And it was by one of the assistants, special assistants to the president of the AFDB, Professor Banji Ilaroyinka. And I find that book very, very intriguing. And I thought, and so many people have spoken about the need for us to be a producing nation and not a consuming nation. Otherwise, we will continue to be in the throes of lack of resources to take care of the issues that we need to take care of. Let's just get into the conversation this morning with three gentlemen joining us this morning. Buka Kyari is former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, and he is also managing director and chief executive officer of INLAX. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Ayo.
We also have Monday Ashibogu, who is former spokesperson for National Association of Small and Monday Michaels Ashibogu, yes, who is former spokesperson for National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Nasme, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Richard Mark Mbaram, who is an international development practitioner. He joined us virtually from Abuja. Thanks for joining us this morning, Mr. Mbaram.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Kyari. Over time, that conversation has been spoken about over and over again. There are those who benchmark Nigeria against China, that some 40 years ago we were at par. I think maybe they started a sprint and we began a marathon. So I don't know, what's your take on all of this consumption to production conversation that we've been having for several years?
I think there are some fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves when it comes to development in general. You know, there is something that people talk about, economic growth versus what I call production-based, job-creating, growth. You can do the numbers. There was a period of time not very long ago where we had anywhere from 7 to 10% GDP growth consistently for about 7 to 10 years. It didn't do much to the living standards, and that wasn't inclusive. When you want to transform your economy, you have to make some tough decisions. One of those is to fundamentally look inwards. The small, medium enterprises concentration, light industries production, it's some basic things that we ordinarily import should be, produced locally. It creates jobs, money flows through the economy, enhances productivity. It may be tough, globally speaking, because you are going to semi-isolate your economy, so to speak. We have the demographics. India did that in the early 80s. China, to a certain extent. In the case of China, it was a complete paradigm shift from their communist-based economy to more market-driven. And they didn't jump into it a la the prescription of World Bank and the rest. They did it the Chinese way, and it had, over one generation, over a period of 30 years, took over 600 million people out of poverty. So we need to look at those, and then we need to have a disciplined execution of that strategy. Doesn't matter which party comes into power, there is a framework that you have to work within those boundaries, and we consistently do those things. It's not sexy, by the way. You don't see it. It's not sexy. It's tough, hard work.
Mr. Buka,
Yeah.
While all of that is admirable, this thinking you are talking about, I believe it is not new. We have had how many national development programs? Or what do we call it? Is it rolling plans?
Yes.
Over the decades, even pre-independence. We had the first national development plan, second national development plan, and all those ones. So is it that those things didn't factor in some of these things that you're talking about?
Those things, yeah, those things have put us in actually, hindsight, we realized that they were good. If you plan for 5 years, it's great. But you have to be consistent with the plan. You don't keep changing the plans, you know, to satisfy the needs of a minister or a president or whatever. It is consistent. You say, this is the philosophy.
So that's
we
what
need to
we've been
invest in
doing?
education, healthcare, road networks, whatever. And by the way, a nation's productivity is directly correlated to the quality of education and skills, technical skills you give.
Okay. In this country, I am not a spring chicken. So I witnessed this country produce cars, produce tires, produce textile, produce food. We had the most delicious biscuits, and they were made in this country. All those things were made in Nigeria. In fact, we should have put proudly made in Nigeria.
But maybe we weren't proud at the time.
We were very proud. I can assure you. So what went wrong? Please. All those factories are now shut down. We had pan in Nigeria. Most of the components of those cars were made in this country. We had Steyr. Most of those Barrack batteries died. What happened to us?
You see, Dr. Booker just made a statement that, you know, your production capacity should be correlated with education. Once there's a deficit in that, you are going to have issues like this. One of the fundamental issues you get is that you have skill sets deficits. Capacity, human resource capacity is not in correlation to your production capacity. That's one of the things you get.
Is that rocket science?
It's not.
We have professors in university, eggheads. Let them sit down and work out a new curriculum.
Working out a curriculum do not just end there, because education actually has the basis of every education in the world is to provide solutions to problems. Yes. That is the basis, irrespective of the discipline you read in school. It's to provide solutions to problems. And if you cannot provide solutions to the problems, you become the problem.
The question she asked, and I would like you to speak a little, just a second. I'd like you to speak directly to it, because it apes what Dr. Booker said the other time about the importance of MSMEs in the mix. So she spoke specifically about some industries and some products. Cars. How many industries serves the automobile industry?
Oh dear.
Thousands.
As in industries that feed the
Cluster.
automobile
In
industry.
fact, the way we did them was wrong. When you are manufacturing cars, you don't start from manufacturing cars. You start from manufacturing spare parts.
We're coming. I'm just saying that, you know. So those businesses that feed the automobile industry are the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Biscuits were not made by oil majors. They were definitely made by micro, worst case, medium enterprises. So to speak to her question specifically, what went wrong?
Okay, I'll tell you what went wrong. I think we focused more on regulation and policy making.
Thank you.
Than actually dealing with issues of implementation. And I will say this, you know, in a system where you find people comfortable to go to public service than stay in private practice, then you have a problem. It means that the driver of the process is now governance rather than private sector production. And once you have that...
Please, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Go ahead.
When I left university, nobody wanted to work in the civil service. We all were looking for jobs in the private sector.
But today, it is actually the most lucrative place to be in, government.
So what happened there again?
Okay, that's why I said when you put more focus on regulation and governance, right, rather than private sector production, that's what happens. You will have more people going into the system to become regulators, and they will muzzle out, and they will also be in competition with the private sector. In some states, you have more than 25 regulatory agencies dealing with one private sector operator. And for a small business person, I think survival is out of the question.
Right.
Oh,
A state
gosh.
in question today now, you have to pay for vehicles parked just right outside your premises with some outrageous billings. Now, when you look at these issues, they come in bits.
Multiple taxation.
Now, when you put this, apart from multiple taxation, you have a system that collapses over a period of time because you do not take the pains of expanding the capacity of such infrastructure. Quality infrastructure is also a determinant of production. You have a power sector that did not improve in the last 25 years or 30 years or 40 years. You have a framework that you keep constructing. I had a challenge with someone here who was trying to prove me wrong about the road construction. This is Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. For 25 years, it's been under one form of construction or the other. The same across the country for all major routes, within states, local governments, and at the national level. Now, when you have these things ongoing, and you cannot account for any type of productivity coming out of it, how many man hours do you waste on the road trying to get an 8 to 5 job? Now, when you look at this over time consistently, you begin to depreciate the resources you have. And those in private sector cannot latch on to the infrastructure that's available. You have this deficit. Now, if you have a power framework that was doing 4,000 megawatts, and you have a market demand for 50,000 megawatts, and you are even grappling with that, trying to get 4,000 to be at a steady cost. Now, there are people already in deficit, and those who are already latched to that other process are already having issues. We have a gas plan. We have a renewable energy plan. We have a lot of money in circulation, and yet, when it gets to the hands of certain persons. So the thing is, the issue is about capacity between governance and private sector production. Okay. So over time, there's been a depreciation. And once there are certain frameworks that you need to put in place. Quality assurance in terms of infrastructure. Do you have the quality infrastructure on energy? Do you have that enables production capacity? And then what about the skill sets that will run that system? If you don't have them in place, you will continue to churn out even graduates who will have no place to work. So you put out a recruitment exercise for an organization as immigration, and you have a stadium filled up with people, and there's a stampede that people died. Is that not a cause for reflection? If you were doing that for a factory.
Just a moment. That calls for concern, and it's a question I would like to ask you, Mr. Dr. Booker. But let me see if we have a guest, joining us virtually on set now. Okay, I understand that he's not ready yet. So the issue that he just raised now, and also goes to what Alera said earlier about young people when she was growing up preferring the private sector to the public sector. The NYSC system, Dr. Booker, why are you laughing? The NYSC system is such that one of the objectives of the NYSC is to raise entrepreneurs, to make the graduate, position the graduate in such a way that when you leave the camp or stop doing whatever it is that you're doing in any of these places that you're serving, you should be able to stand on your own. Start a small business by yourself. Yes. But it would seem like from what he has just said now, a stadium packed with people, and all of a sudden, they would rather get a job. For 10 jobs meant for 10 people, we have 50,000 people wanting to get that job. I understand. Just a second, just chew on it for a bit. Mr. Mbaram, thanks for joining us this morning. Well, you've heard the conversation begin and all of that. And I know that, there is some background that perhaps people need to have about this whole challenge we have about Nigeria's development prowess or a lack of it. What's your take? Perhaps we want to begin if there is such a thing as a competitive advantage that we have lost steam on over time.
Yes, thank you very much. Without a doubt, Nigeria has profound, productive competencies. Whether you want to look at from primary production to secondary or tertiary production, Nigeria is really seething with potentials, but we don't, of course, eat potentials. You want to look at how the country evolved right from our colonial, experience. The country had really developed its agricultural sector and was focused, though, on exporting primary produce, and generating income therefrom. But as at the point of independence, it became clear to leadership that we needed to expand our industrial competency. But it was done. It was done in a manner that became a bit of a challenge because we did not have the human resource base, that could really fuel a leapfrogging into the industrial ecosystem as had been contrived at inception. But what has been lacking largely, and I want to key into the conversation that other panelists have been having hitherto, is a level of sincere understanding of what the need is, and an adherence to a clearly laid out plan over a long period of time. The Chinese experience that you had referred to, or you want to look at the Indian one, if you want to also pick up the Brazilian instance, it is hinged on a long-term implementation of a strategy or a plan, a national plan, which basically would, ordinarily incorporate mistakes and learnings therefrom. And then you basically you're now able to rework or refashion your strategy to suit your existential needs on the ground. There's no point playing to the gallery, ordinarily, because that would end up playing out in the sense of you having a profound failure to failure attaching to your plan. And that's clear from Nigeria's experience. Whatever you want to say, however you want to permutate, the fact remains that we have failed. The evidences are everywhere. So if you want to recalibrate, you want to be sincere about the mistakes that have been made over time. You want to appreciate the fact that you have expended profound resources to put up white elephant projects in the name of industrial, enclaves. You have not supported, the private sector and provided it with the necessary, backbone to be.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, we have to get you back because you touched on a sore point there. Where we ought to have begun. The competitive advantage part. You have to come back to talk to us about it. But back to that question. Dr. Buka.
Can I highlight something?
Okay, please.
There is a larger conversation that we need to be making as a nation. When it comes to that developmental production-related growth, there are 5 key things that need to be in place. One is called accumulation. I believe it's a World Bank document. Accumulation, innovation, allocation, stabilization, and inclusion. 5 pillars. Accumulation simply means that we need to invest in those basic things I've mentioned earlier: education, health, skill development, training people to be employable, and all of that. It should be done purposely, not just haphazardly. On the innovation side, it's not about everybody has to be a rocket scientist. No, it's just finding new ways of doing things. It should be policy driven, policy of innovation that actually is grounded in some framework whereby it's encouraged incentivized, and we grow. Allocation means that we don't have infinite capital. We have scarce capital. They should be channeled to those productive sectors, not consumptive, a la Prof's book. Now, when you have done all of those, you need to have a stabilization effect. You can talk about security, you can talk about rule of law, whatever. And then at the end of the day, is that rising water lifting all boats, or is it excluding certain classes? So you make to have policy that raises all of us. Because if you begin to neglect certain sectors or regions, you will end up destroying everything because you have neglected certain regions or certain sectors or certain aspects of humanity within the country. So those 5 pillars, if done purposely, done with policies that are going to enshrine growth, then we will see what I call productivity or production-based job creating economic growth possible.
Dr. Carey, I beg to stay with you. You were chairman of the Economic Summit Group, and it was my belief that government listened to you, to the summit group.
We can have another debate about that, but that's
that already answered my question. But I was going to ask you, the things that he spoke about earlier, about 25 agencies dealing with just one industry. I mean,
one company.
One company.
One company, sorry.
Yes.
I'm sure you all saw this, and there would have been things that you would have discussed at your summits. Did you advise government about it? What was their reaction regarding what it was doing and how it was killing industry in this country?
So we knew what we were doing. We knew that policy recommendations that you give government, they don't adopt everything lock, stock, and barrel. They may conveniently pick, 2 or 3 out of the 10 recommendations or whatever. But now, as a think tank, as a policy think tank on enhancing the economy, private sector driven, we will continue to make those recommendations. It may not be always rosy relationship with government. In some instances, NESG, and I'm not speaking for NESG now, but generally speaking, NESG may make the recommendations and government may decide not to adopt it. However, as time goes on, they see the wisdom, they come around to it. The idea of privatization was first given birth to at the first or second summit. And NESG has been having that summit for the last 27 years. So essentially, it's a life journey. And we believe that Nigeria is a work in process, because a nation is a continuum. We may get the right leaders, we may get bad leaders, but we have to continually make the right recommendations on policies that would uplift the lives of everybody. And that is actually the duty of every citizen. It doesn't have to be an ESG doing that. It is all of us.
Well, I remember Mr. Ashibogu, the AFDB president, said some months ago, even if it's up to a year, that it is cheaper to import into Ghana than it is to Nigeria, giving reasons such that cost some thousands of dollars as opposed to, Ghana and all of that. And he said that it's part of the reason why importation costs are high here, such that there is nothing to take out of the country, so to speak. So you both, the three of you actually, have spoken about the limitations, the leads that we have. We have some good enough time to talk about what we need to do long term. one of the questions posted to Dr. Buka the other time is that of long-term planning. And Mr. Mbaram has also spoken to the fact that we need to have a long-term plan. So if we're going to have a long-term plan, if you would suggest that as well, and we have an 8-year term for each government, federal or state, how do we sustain it?
Well, you know, it's always convenient anywhere in the world to give superficial solutions to problems. And that has always been the issue. Now, whether the person is going to be there for 8 years or 20 years, for as long as the system provides for policy swings, you will not have any sustainable economic development.
Does the system provide for policy swings?
Of course, yes.
How?
The system enables policy leaders to suspend another policy midway and start off with another one. You could even jettison a policy. I've heard some governors say to people that that is the project of his predecessor and he's not going to touch it. And there's nothing that can be done about it. And you're talking about millions of dollars in terms of investment. I have seen the federal government invest in a gas processing zone, and an individual has held us to ransom after people have deployed about $300 million into that industrial farm. It happened in Delta. It's happened in Rivers. It's happened in Kano. We've had, this is not at national level, we're talking at state levels, at local government levels. So the thing is, if policy drivers can truncate a process midway, and there is no guarantee for even arbitration or for a legal redress that can be resolved within a time frame, an investor could recoup his money. PI&D and all these scandals that came with it is as a result of such issues. Someone wakes up overnight, introduces a policy midway where there's an existing policy. Because we like to work in silos. And the problem is, it's not about who is going to be there for 8 years. We must define, if you have a roadmap, this is first industrial plan, it was reviewed. That's why you have the second one. We have even the economic recovery and growth network.
Right.
It's one thing to grow, and it's another to develop. So you could say the economy is growing, and the money is going out. Today, we have a lot of FDI coming into the fintech sector, but the profit is not staying here. So you have just few individuals, but a lot of money running in the process. And then you can account for GDP growth, but it will not trickle down to the average Nigerian's household income.
You raised an issue, you touched on an issue, especially about the long-term planning. I understand Mr. Mbaram is with us again. Well, Mr. Mbaram, you spoke to planning, long-term planning. Well, you have had a challenge. You have heard someone who practices in the small and medium enterprise space in Nigeria talk about the challenge of sustainability of long-term plans. What's your take?
No, without a doubt, he's correct. We have a deficit in terms of our ability to consistently implement, development plans, and the focus needs to be, I must say, on infrastructure. Infrastructure for me is like it basically is the galvanizer. Home and pop industries, MSMEs, they all need power, primarily speaking. If you have power in this country, consistent power supply in this country, the economy itself could, has the potential or
Mr.
the capacity.
Baram, we hear that, okay? But the challenge of long-term planning, and I think, that's one of the major challenges here. Government will say, this policy is government-enabled, private sector-driven, but then government seems to withdraw its enablement when there is a policy somersault, or to use the word that Mr. Shibogi used here, policy reversal based on the whims of one government official or one individual somewhere and all of that. You've heard of all of his examples. And you also happen to work with government. So in terms of the sustainability of long-term plans, especially the ones that government expects private investors to bring in money investing, what do they do if there is no assurance that that investment is going to last?
Capital will always go to where it is comfortable, however you want to look at it. That's why we've lost so many businesses to the countries like Ghana, for instance. And I was trying to make the point that comfort for capital is predominant in your planning ordinarily in terms of the ability to bring in sustainability. So if you have government actively working against business interests, whether they say so or not, but it is clear by force of how they even manage the business of governance, then we are basically, undermining ourselves. And I keep making this point that the end result is supposed to be our means of grading ourselves. It's not what we say, but what the outcomes are. So if your numbers are clearly showing that you're in the deficit, you've got to be sincere enough to realize that you're not doing stuff right and you need to tweak it. Coming back to policy, sustainable policy presupposes that the government incoming understands the benefits of the policy that is in existence. But you cannot take it away from it's the power of the system, how the constitution is contrived. The man who's coming into office would want to at least deliver stuff that he can readily piggyback on, maybe for even his subsequent attempts to return to office. So it would now need an institutional intervention. For instance, I'll take you back to the 2011 to 2015, agricultural policy, what we call the Agricultural Transformation Agenda, the ATA, under current president of the African Development Bank, then Minister of Agriculture. But that policy, is internationally renowned. It succeeded, even though it was not perfect. But by the time we had a change in government, we had a new minister who basically just decided not to adhere to it and chose to do a different thing. Today, we can see the impact, and we're now working backwards to begin to reconnect with the core of that policy. All right. So now, just to come back to it, we've got to utilize what we have to get what we want. So the legislature, for instance, needs to be more active, because if we were to have legislations on the existing policies, particularly those that we consider to be strategically important to the development of the nation, then we could lock those policies in, understanding our dynamics. And I come back to the book, by Professor Banji, From Consumption to Production. It's a Bible, because it clearly details Nigeria's efforts, at becoming a production economy. Though, frustrating as it might appear, we basically have kept coming back to the same, lessons, or will I say mislearnings, time and again. But we still have the best opportunity is now to rework this, to change our approach and our disposition to governance.
Oh, we've lost him again. Dr. Carey, in all of this, no matter how beautiful our policies are and all that, the engine room that drives those policies, which is the civil service, we need to look at. They are so infamous now that they are even referred to as the evil service. And all attempts to reform that service have proved practically, impossible. So, how far can we go with all this development and growth and all that without the input of the civil service?
It's an arm of government that is fundamental catalyst in the growth or development of any nation. One, it needs to be professionalized. Two, they should be paid very well. Compensation need to be clearly, you know, be able to take them home, as the saying goes, and you would find quality. The problem is that if you change the civil service, and they know, as Dr. Ashibagu mentioned, that they are more about going in there to become gatekeepers, then we will have a problem. Because yeah, you can be the private sector CEO or whatever, trying to develop and grow the business, but we'll find you. You'll come to the intersection. You'll come to the gate,
Yeah.
and So essentially, there has to be a mindset shift. One, two. I believe that there has been a lot of reports. Orosanya report is something that has been so famous. When it came out, everybody held on to it. I thought that it would be implemented that year that report came. How many years ago was that?
12, 11?
On that, we had a conversation earlier.
And is that the decision-making process in
Just
Nigeria?
on
You
that
have
same
something,
thing.
and then it will take you more than 12 years to
On
do
that
it?
same,
Come
Dr.
on.
Buka,
Yes.
we have had reports. This may come to you as a surprise. I know it doesn't really.
Yeah.
The first civil service or public service reform project in Nigeria was in 1934.
Correct.
Between 1934 and 1960, we had 11 commissions.
But the thing is that civil
And
service...
we're still looking at the same thing.
But the civil service of Nigeria in those days were professionals.
Yes, they were.
Alice and Aida, all of those, even as a young child,
Felipe
where my
Asiodu.
parents worked as civil servants, there was professionalism.
So how come we had those?
The only industry in the Northeast, Ashaka Cement Factory, was a project that my dad handled. As a kid, I remember. The thing is that they did it as a service. But they were well compensated. So, what today one would call middle class or upper middle class. Yeah. Now, there is no need to do anything but to serve and move on. Now, what had happened and historians have different interpretation. I think the military incursion into the body politic of Nigeria changed the dynamics of the professionalism of civil service. Mm. Our civil servants are no different from, say, a nation like Singapore, where it's also a former British colony that had civil servants that up to today are professionals. In fact, young people, first-class graduates in universities in Singapore, would rather actually go and serve in the civil service than go into the private sector. Do you know why? They're better paid. I repeat it, they are better paid. Now, why is that? It's because they have the sense of higher productivity. Year on year, they're more productive than the previous 5, 8, 10 years back. And that changes. Whereas, can we say that about ours?
How do we reverse that? Because one of the ways that I look at it, when we employ a president in Nigeria, we're employing him into at least 1,000 jobs, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
I tell you why. There are a number of ministries. Under those ministries, we have departments. Under those departments, we have agencies.
Correct.
And the president is going to appoint the heads of those boards, the members of the boards of the organizations, the managing directors, and those that are to be appointed, and all of that. So that's 1,000 jobs at least. And these people, from what you're saying now, are not well paid. How in the universe
can we do anything?
Is the president going to achieve anything?
And in fact, this is actually a fantastic conversation. I have said that many, many times. If we are copying something, we better copy it to improve upon it. That's the concept of innovation that I highlighted earlier. Now, we're copying from the Americans, right? When the American president is hiring the equivalent of a minister, he has a transition team that picks 6, 7 candidates for every slot, interview them, screen them before they select one person. It's not given. Have we ever had any parastatal or any ministry whereby any of our presidents since 1999 have interviewed a candidate for a slot? I mean, you're the journalists. Have you ever reported anything like that? None. Kim, who later on became the World Bank president, Obama interviewed him. He said for him to impress Obama, he read the PhD thesis of Obama's mom. He said, that's how you get your job, you know? But the game, the serious part about it is that that's a developmental economics paper. And he was a PhD developmental economist. So he's competent to be in that job. But to add to the icing on the cake, he proved to the son that he had read the mother's PhD thesis. Now, how can you reject somebody who had read your mom's write-up?
Decades before.
Decades before, you know?
Yeah.
So the game is that we need to change our mindset. We need to have a paradigm shift. And if we want to professionalize the civil service, we have to take some bitter pills, shed the dead weights, restructure, put it in a better shape. Long term, it will be for the benefit of, if not ourselves, at least our children and our grandchildren.
Yeah.
Mr. Shibo, we have raised a number of issues here. And the reason for all of this are not far-fetched. Employment figures are abysmal. Revenue figures are abysmal. Inflation figures are regrettable. Poverty figures... The figures are not just...
Can you find a word to describe that?
I don't want
The poverty figures?
Are poor.
Yeah.
So, and there are those who have pointed to the fact that in the years where Nigeria was industrialized, we had it better. How do we reverse our industrialization fortunes? We have spoken about a number of things, but it would seem like, and I hope we still have, we'll have Dr. Mbaram, Mr. Mbaram back, because he was speaking to that book that Professor Ibanji, did. How do we begin to reverse our industrialization fortunes and bring back those industry practitioners, leaders that have since left?
Well, for me, you're not reversing anything. You're not going to reverse. You're going to think of an innovative way forward, because some of those industries will not be relevant in today's economics. You're not going to compete favorably with anybody in terms of fabrics. Right now, if you start the fabric industry, you're not going to. China has built a very big market of dependence around the world. So you need to ask
Suppose
yourself,
you shut your borders.
No, if you shut, you're just shooting yourself in the leg.
Okay.
We shut our borders for how many years? What's the outcome? No, let's be fair. Let's be honest. I don't believe in certain measures that people carry on to say that that's the way you need to go about it. Yeah, China did shut its borders. This country did that. No, how did they do that? And at what time? Are you shutting borders post-COVID? You should be a realist. You should face facts. You should match your figures with your reality. At the moment, you can barely generate up to 4,000 megawatts of electricity. The guys who are even off-grid can give you up to 8,000 megawatts. So the issue is, if you're going to talk about reversal, it's like taking 10 steps backwards also. Okay. Because you are not going to be competitive. What you need to look at is to ask yourself, in what sector or industry do you want to play in now that will make you significantly relevant and get a lot of people out of the poverty line?
So in which industry would you recommend for Nigeria to look at?
We've had some milestones in the services sector and also in the area of ICT. You could play that area and ensure that you have more funds sitting in your country, which you could deploy, for example, into agriculture, not just agriculture in terms of production. You're talking about in terms of processing. And then look at how you can generate funds from exports. Being competitive, having a proper framework for quality infrastructure. That's what we're saying. If you have quality infrastructure for all organizations to latch on, people will run the process for you.
Mr. Shivago, funds from export. What would we be exporting? I remember when Babangida first came and he said, remember that slogan, export to survive?
Right.
And I was trying to export shrimps. My shrimps were at the airport and customs asked me for bribe. And I quoted export to survive to them. And they said, Madam, be speaking grammar, your shrimp go there for tarmac by tomorrow morning.
Your shrimp is likely to get expired there.
Exactly, on the tarmac.
You could also recall that some persons tried to export yams recently.
So what would we be exporting?
The thing is, that's why I said, if you have quality infrastructure in place, you will not have a customs asking you such questions. Because the system will be simply automated. If a system is automated, who is going to ask you for bribe?
Correct.
The system would process and give you a document. You see, and it will go through the quality assurance processes that is required by the experts. You don't need these third parties. You get to the airport, people are still doing things manually where you have digital frameworks and platforms at the same airport. Someone comes into the country, you are asking me to bring a print copy of a COVID certificate where there's a scanner for it. That tells you the lacuna between that person's competency
mindset
and the infrastructure that's available. Now, why we're saying this is, you see, when you develop a quality framework, it's about building skill sets for people and making them relevant. So you'll find customs just there for compliance. And if they are there for compliance, it means that they will only raise flags where questions need to be asked.
But before we can get to that point, we have to address what Dr. Buka said about paying the civil service bill, because these customs officers themselves are civil service, right?
Correct, all of them.
But the
Rank
joke is
and
on
file.
us. You spend. No, you see, the joke is on us. Really, look at our budget. Recurrent expenditure is now accounting for close to 40%.
Right.
And out of that 40%, 90% of it is on salaries. And you recall there's an acting accountant general who has been removed, who alluded to the fact that you need to borrow to pay the civil service for that same meager salary. So where are you going to even get the funds? The thing is, even if you say you need to prune the civil service by what some governors are alluding to, which I don't subscribe to, you will see also having to spend money on severance packages. And it's not sustainable to maintain persons on pension from the age of 50 and above. When you know that they are productive. The truth remains that we've had an over-bloated service system. A lot of people need to be placed in where they will be productive as civil servants. And civil service is supposed to be a backbone for any economic development if you have proper persons who are shaped in policy making. Because the policies the civil service develops builds a country.
Right.
Look at Britain, for example. Look at Singapore. Look at countries that have developed milestones from nothing to something. It's policy frameworks that they develop that enables the private sector to run effectively. And they are not rent seekers. No, you can't. Let's give an example. You live in Abuja and you pay a rent of 15 million naira as a civil servant, and your annual pay package is not up to 1 million.
How?
And you expect that person to operate within the framework of the civil service? Are we kidding?
Okay, good question. Well, Mr. Mbaram, you were trying to make a point the other time. We're drawing closer to solutions now. And you alluded to Prof's book, and I don't know if you may want to speak, to it, because one of the number one challenges we have as a nation is that of revenue. The finance minister said as much. We have to borrow to service our borrowing. I don't even know if that makes any sense to me, but there are those who believe, economists, some of them here, that if we are able to shore up production, and as Mr. Shivago said, export, then we'll be able to hopefully trap some funds within the country, and we will do less of spending. We'll be able to, have a lot more resources to do stuff that we need to do What's your take on all of these? Talking solutions now.
Yeah, so I just would, can you hear me, please?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Fantastic. So I'll just allude to chapter 11 of the book From Consumption to Production by Professor Banji Oyelaran Oyinka. I mean, he starts that chapter with a quote. We can chart our future clearly and wisely only when we know the path which has led to the present. That's from a quote from Adlai Stevenson. And in all sincerity, I'm an advocate for, change, but sincere change hinged on a proper understanding of your situational realities. How do you explain that Nigeria, even at a time when some countries of the world were making a killing from petroleum product export, is in a situation now where we gain from primary production or export of crude oil, and then we lose out because we're importing, finished products, petroleum products. It should be an issue for us to really, really, take our time to appraise. And if you cannot, be sincere enough to address your problem as it presents itself, then you are only running around in circles, and you will continue to come back to that point time and again, which is the experience that our economy and our nation has had over time. Professor Banji clearly details that, but he prefers solutions. And he says, look, we need to be sincere about how we are configured institutionally. And someone, the MSME colleague, I think that's Dr. Achipo,
yes,
mentioned this. We can't have. I'll give you an instance. The lady was talking. Your colleague was talking about exporting something previously. But let's work in the recent times. Zobo, hibiscus. You bring it from Kano into Lagos. It arrives. Welcome. This is Lagos, where you have the Ogun State border. It arrives there in 3 days. From that point to the point where you put it on, the ship, it takes you almost 90 days, if not more. By the time it gets there, the quality of the hibiscus has more or less depreciated, and it cannot meet international standards. We've had rejections, resulting from this scenario I just painted now. So these redundancies in the system have got to be addressed and addressed frontally.
The question then is how. You heard Dr. Buka talk about that as well. And everyone here has spoken about that. So the question is how. He spoke about, you heard Dr. Buka talk about the need to re-engineer the civil service, the larger system that runs the engine of government, of the policies and all of that. So the question is how? How do we do what you're recommending?
So we will need to appraise our ground norm, which is the Constitution, and it has to be sincerely appraised to see whether we are devolving powers in excess to specific, arms or offices of government. We need to also look at we should also appraise the global trends and realities at the present time. The colleague was talking about it. You cannot shut your borders. It's not possible. But you can also appreciate how development is trending and markets are trending globally, so as to be able to structure your economy in such a way as to benefit from those trends. If you have, for instance, a population that is in excess of 200 million people, it should be there should be a way of working around that to make sure that that population becomes an advantage rather than liability. Okay? You should also ensure that your existing competencies, particularly as it was stated, ICT and all of that, your youth populace and their ingenuity, which is already playing out in the activities of some of the people you call miscreants, the Yahoo boys. These are ingenious individuals, in all honesty. And that is in itself a pointer to the fact that if we were to targetedly, develop, provide opportunities for our young people, they would in themselves, be more of solutions rather than constitute problems to us.
Okay.
At the end of the day, and as Professor Banji alluded, we've got to get serious. Lee Kuan Yew, somebody talks about Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of Singapore, wrote a book, From Third World to First World. I would recommend us to read that. In addition, hello, can you hear me, please?
Yeah, we
in
can
addition,
clearly.
Yes, in addition to Professor Banji's book, we should read the book of Lee Kuan Yew. The reason is, it talks about Nigeria. There's a part that talks about Nigeria, where Lee Kuan Yew indicated that he was in Nigeria and met with our minister, Okotie-Eboh, way back. And the minister who was in charge of the economy was talking about banning importation of shoes because he had set up a a tannery, a shoe factory. And Lee Kuan Yew documented in his book, he said he went to bed that night understanding that these are a different set of people operating by different sets of rules. Today, Singapore is what it is, Nigeria is where it is. So it tells you that we need to be real, we need to be strategic, we need to be sincere in addressing our problems. We can't continue to pretend that there is no elephant in the room. We've got to point to it. Okay. And that's my take.
Okay. Dr. Kerry, we're talking about how to boost the revenue now. We can't talk about this without bringing up the issue of subsidy. I mean, if we're thinking about 6 trillion in subsidy for next month, for next year, then we do have a big problem, haven't we? How are we going to go about getting rid of this famous subsidy?
What do we normally do when we want to buy something and we cannot afford it?
We save.
We save, or we don't buy it at all.
We suspend the thought.
We suspend the thought.
Kill it.
So as a nation, we need to also think like families. It's a combination of families that come up and become a nation. If we cannot afford something, why do we think that we can do it? That's what that fuel subsidy is. It's not helping anything or anybody for that matter. It only helps the people that bring in those fuel
products
because they know that there is a gap between how much they have paid and how much they are going to recover from government as their reimbursement. So apart from those few, the nation is not better for it. So the fundamental thing, let's not even talk about the revenue. The revenue is about tax collection and all of that. We need to be more efficient and so on and so forth. But we need to block the leakage. And that is whether it is fuel subsidy, anything that has to do with consumption subsidy. I think it is the book that Mark just mentioned about, Prof's book. It's just that. It literally spells it out for us. And there is no way out. Okay. My only concern is that maybe it is because of being a political season. People are not saying what needs to happen.
Are we always
what
in a
needs to be
political
done?
season?
But we have to bite the bullet and move on.
Okay, now there's something Mr. Ashibogu said the other time that I'd like you to speak to. The role of subnationals, states.
Yeah.
Most of the time when we talk about development, growth, production-driven growth and all, we look at the federal government. But then that's not to say that the states do not have a role to play. I don't know of many states, but I am aware that there is such a plan, a 25-year plan in Lagos, for instance, that, okay, this plan is going to go X number of years, and if you follow it, so, it's going to end up in so way. I don't know if you see that as something that needs to be replicated across all the states, then also speak to, I'm sorry, it's a bouquet of questions.
Correct.
Also speak to the regional advantages. In the First Republic, we had, I think, 3 main regions, and they had their jobs, so to speak, cut out for them. I remember I saw a document produced by Leke Alder, who also talked about regional advantages that the various regions of the country has. Trade and commerce, he gave, I think, to the southeast. Southwest, I think, had agriculture, and so on and so on and so forth. And there is a region for adding value to agricultural produce and all of that. So the states and the regional collaborations, the challenges, long-term planning. What's your take? How do we begin to look at these issues?
So it's actually so many things at once. But
yes,
but the fundamental thing is that, as you've stated, the focus always had been at the federal level, at the center, and the reason is that they are the most visible because they have all the state governors go there every month to collect their pocket money or whatever, and go back. Now, but seriously speaking, it is not what you would expect. But the expectation, though, is that every state, being an economy on its own, need to be looking at its economic trajectory or growth trajectory. And being also from zones, since we have now created what is called the 6 geopolitical zones, there is also a comparative advantage that they can mine amongst themselves and then be able to come as a bloc to do certain things that one state cannot do. But if 6 of you or 5 of you come together, you would be able to afford to do that. Even energy, even production of electricity, for example, because it's a catalyst for development. And many other things that you could put your resources together to come as a bloc and build it. There is none. And the thing is to think outside of the box, to be innovative, to find new ways of doing things. Those are the combined factors that can change the trajectory. There is NDDC, there is NEDC, there is, many of those. But those are all driven by the federal government. What I would want to see is to see 5, 6, 4, 3 state governors coming together to form an economic bloc, so to speak, or an industrialization bloc, and then begin to invest in a location common to all of that, and see how it will affect those states' fortunes.
Just a very quick one, 30 seconds.
Yes.
Is that, because I know you are aware of the SAPs, the AFDB's special agro, is that something in that region?
That is something you tap. That's an external source. Okay. But what I'm talking about is to put together, to come together to say, look, for example, if you look at just the internally generated revenues of Lagos, Ogun, Oshun, just the boundaries, right? And if you decide to say, we're going to put together commodities exchange, commodities processing, whatever, all these things that each state is trying to do, like a cargo, air, whatever. Yes. No, let's do it as a one entity where we all share. It's a shared services.
Absolutely.
Because you have mega resources, you combine your resources, pull it, and it can be a dynamic force. Absolutely. In that export-driven productive
economy. They're busy competing with each other, you see.
Well, maybe
so that might be a tall.
It could be co-opetition, We cooperate to compete.
We have to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of our conversation this morning. Kyari Bukai is a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and is managing director and CEO INLAC's Africa Operations. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Monday Ashibago is a former spokesman of the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
As well as Richard Mark Mbaram, who joined us virtually from Abuja. He's an international development practitioner. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.
Well, that said, that done, we go on to something that hopefully will help you think better. Mental health. We'll be back.
Well, thank you for staying with us. Um, remember, we said at the beginning of this program that there was plenty of traffic on the way. Well, actually, it all began yesterday, and it is still ongoing. And that is the reason for which our next guest, who is a consultant clinical psychologist, cannot be with us in the studio. Dr. Chris Aboje is stuck in traffic. But that is not going to deter us. We are still going to talk about lifestyle plans for positive mental health. What does that mean? It just means that, we always talk about good health, but part of good health is also mental health.
Perhaps sometimes the good health is lacking because mental health is lacking.
Is not quite there.
And you talked about Dr. Boje being in traffic. I hope it is not also affecting his own mental balance, but he's here with us.
Dr. Aboje, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good Lord, where are you?
Did you run back?
Well, I am in traffic, but thank God to technology, actually. So this is the effect of technology.
Wow.
Okay.
I love your backdrop.
You don't want us to see the real thing, obviously, which is okay for our own mental health as well.
Oh, God.
So the real thing would be you seeing me in my car, actually.
But you're in an official car right now, so that's good.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
So,
It's a pleasure.
When we talk about a healthy lifestyle and we link it with mental health, what does that mean?
Okay. I think that a very good place to look at it or start from is to understand that you can't actually have health without mental health. You see, when people talk about health, they focus mostly on the physical health. But if you look at the holistic definition of what health is, you find out that health is not just the absence of illness or infirmity. It also includes, a sound mental, social, and of course, like I said, physical well-being, and which goes across, the way you think, the way you feel, your reactions to situations, like the way I'm reacting to this situation right now, and including your, financial, social relationships. These are all the things that actually make up the health of a person, not just the absence of illness.
Perhaps, okay, when we talk about mental health, can you perhaps define for us what that means? Because when people, let's use a common street parlance that we all know, he's gone mental. So, perhaps there's a need for us to even understand what it means to have a stable mental health. Can you describe for us the spectrum of mental health?
Well, thank you. I think that's a very important question because just like you mentioned, when people talk about mental health, many times what I notice is that they focus on what we call mental illness, which is not necessarily mental health. So if you look at the definition from the WHO's perspective, you will see that your mental health is a state of well-being where the person is able to actualize their potential, right? It's also that state where the person is able to be productive, manage the normal stresses of life, and of course, be fruitful and contribute to their environment, their community. Now, when you look at that, you realize that you can't be productive without mental health. You can't even have health without mental health. But I like to also look at mental health from a very simple perspective, which is breaking it down into the components. And the three components of mental health are just simply the way you think, the way you feel, and how you act, right? So when you look at that, you realize that we all have mental health, right? Now, when you talked about the spectrum, I would look at I would like to define that more from a place of a dimension. And the dimensions of mental health would include your mental well-being, and then of course mental illness. Now, like I said, we all have mental health. on different levels. So you see that a person could be mentally well or have a good mental well-being because they are satisfied with life. So mental well-being is your satisfaction with life, with your career, with everything you do. So your ability to be satisfied. Now, it doesn't say that you don't have plans for the future, but it just says, you're satisfied with where you are. And then, of course, you can begin to look forward to working towards the other things that you want to do. But mental illness, on the other hand, talks about, again, I talked about the three components, the thoughts, emotions, and behavior. So when there is a dysfunction in these three components, there's a dysfunction in the way a person thinks, there's a dysfunction in the way the person feels, and a dysfunction in the way the person acts, then we can begin to talk about a mental illness. But that is not enough, because you need to look at the duration. How long is this person experiencing this distress or this dysfunction for? So if a person feels sad for a couple of days, it doesn't mean that they have a mental illness. They are just sad. They're just experiencing an emotion. However, if that sadness goes on for a couple of weeks and then begins to affect work, causes them significant distress, deviates from what they used to be before, then we might begin to talk about, okay, could this be a mental illness, right? So this is important so that we're not just quick to say, oh, I have depression, I have a mental illness, because you might just be experiencing an emotion. That is not enough to classify you as having a mental illness.
Sometimes, Doc, some of these things are circumstantial. For instance, the situation you find yourself right now. You may have, because of the knowledge that you have, you may be able to maintain a balance. Many people will literally lose it. Simply because they are maybe claustrophobic, or they can't. They have what you guys call ADD, attention, something.
Deficit disorder.
So they are locked down in traffic for hours. Definitely, circumstances or the environment can play a role. Yes or no?
Yes. So when we look at mental health and mental illness, environmental factors are a strong trigger to people developing a mental illness. In fact, we say that there are three major, triggers. So you have the medical conditions, you have psychological conditions, and then social factors. Social factors like the one I'm experiencing right now. But even at that, it's very important for us to understand that the brain doesn't work with reality. The brain works with perception. So it comes down to how that individual interprets the experience that they're having, right? It comes down to that. Now, of course, the experiences that you've had over time can determine that. But and like you said earlier, by virtue of my profession, I'm able to say to myself, reinterpret the experience. So yes, situations can trigger mental illnesses, but what is most important is the individual's ability to interpret, or in some cases, misinterpret the experiences they're having.
So, Doc, how much do our lifestyle choices affect our mental health?
So I think it's a bidirectional effect, such that lifestyle affects mental health, and mental health also affects lifestyle, right?
Okay.
I'll look at it from a perspective of, so if you look at lifestyle is quite broad. You look at a person's social lifestyle. So interaction with people, for example, the relationships that they keep, they all have a significant effect on their mental health. We talked about the environment and the situations. Look at, in certain economic states, economic situations where some people are unemployed, that has a significant effect on their mental health. Because, of course, like I said, it determines the kind of interpretation that their brain would conceive. And that interpretation would also affect the kind of chemicals the brain would secrete. Now, eventually, this would affect the person's mental well-being. It would affect their emotional state. It would affect their reaction to life events. Of course, finances as well. So there's a simple joke that I have. I heard someone say that, the cause of mental illness for many people is poverty. It might sound like a joke, but that's a significant factor. That if a person cannot afford basic amenities, things that they need to survive, to function, it could also affect their mental well-being. And on the other hand, like I said, that the mental health of the person can also affect their lifestyle, such that if a person is beginning to develop a mental health condition or a mental health concern, that can begin to affect the kind of choices that they make, the kind of decisions that they make, right? So take, for example, a person who is dependent on a substance, and maybe let me even create a broader image. A person who is stressed at work, needs to cope, and then turns to alcohol or a substance, goes to the pub to drink something or smoke something just to cope with the stress at work. Now, over time, you can then see that their life they become dependent on the substance such that they can't even function at work without using the substance. So you see how there's it's like a circle. Lifestyle affects the mental health, and of course, mental health can also affect the lifestyle and the choices, decisions of the individual.
Perhaps, there is a need for us to also know some common mental health issues that people don't even know are mental health issues. For instance, what you just spoke to now, the example you gave, dependence on something, a lack of it in some people, some might say, might cause some form of anxiety. People don't know that anxiety is a sort of mental health issue, correct?
Yes, yes, you're correct. You're correct. But I like to step in here and try to differentiate that there's a difference between having anxiety and then having anxiety disorder, right? Why? Because anxiety is an emotion, and it's an emotion that is there for your good, right? Many people don't know this, and because we're not taught this, we're not taught that emotions are not bad, like people have, like we've been taught. Like I joke around that if you ever attended a religious circle where somebody says to you that this week you're going to be sad, you probably will never go back there again, right? Because you say that, no, God forbid. But if they said to you, this week you're going to be happy, oh, you said this guy is, a man of God, and you want to go back there. Because we think that happiness is a good emotion and sadness is a bad emotion. But if I get to shock people to help them understand that these are just emotions, and every emotion is a messenger. The reason why you have these emotions is because the emotion is trying to tell you something about your experience, about the environment, right? And your ability to understand and then act accordingly is very important. Now, and this is also very important because it differentiates emotions from disorders. Before you say that a person has a mental disorder, a mental illness, in the case of anxiety, for example, you need to look at the duration. How long has this person been experiencing this anxiety for? Number one. You also you also need to look at how is this affecting the person's functioning, right? So that's very important. How is this affecting the person's work, the person's interaction with people, the person's functioning generally? How much distress is it causing the person and the people around them? And of course, does this deviate from who the person used to be? Now, these are the four things you need to look out for before you say a person has a mental disorder.
Okay.
But then to then go on to say that, yes, there are a lot of these disorders or illnesses, for example, depression, anxiety, bipolar, and substance use disorder as well. Very, very common these days. And you also have other disorders like sleep disorders and the likes. ADHD, like you mentioned earlier, schizophrenia, which are more severe and illnesses. So the list of mental illnesses can go on and on and on. But it's important for us to be able to differentiate emotions from mental illnesses.
Are there triggers that people to these things common in some people that they are not aware of and they need to pay attention to?
Yeah. There are triggers. I mentioned earlier that we could group this into medical, or biological, psychological, and social factors. So a simple biological factor could be genetic predisposition. That means that maybe somebody in the family has had this illness or condition before and probably has passed a genetic code to the individual, right? But the good news, and I need to emphasize that it's the good news, is that the fact that you have a genetic code does not mean that you develop a mental illness, right? It just simply means that there is a genetic predisposition. However, that genetic predisposition needs a trigger, other triggers, other what we call stressors. Now, the stressors could then include psychological factors like the person's childhood experiences, history of abuse, social factors like the environment where the person lives in, poverty, like I mentioned earlier, religion as well, very significant, political and economic factors. Now, these are factors that can, and including workplace-related factors, unemployment, could then trigger a person to develop a mental illness. And so the triggers are everywhere we look. You know, anything can become a trigger to anybody. I think the difference for us is that we all have different thresholds. So what could be a trigger to me might not be a trigger to somebody else. And what can be a trigger to somebody else might not be a trigger to me. So again, our experiences determine what is a trigger to us and what can predispose us or make us develop a full-blown mental illness.
Okay.
Okay, go on.
Yes. How important is exercise and relaxation and fresh air? How important are all these things to a stable mental health?
Well, I think these are lifestyle practices that can help promote a person's mental well-being.
Oh, really?
Take, for example, exercise. Exercise allows the brain to secrete what we call pleasurable chemicals like endorphin. So, of course, which would then go on to promote a positive mental well-being. But beyond exercise, like you talked about fresh air, I think that also contributes. But you see, diet is a significant lifestyle practice that can also help to maintain a positive mental well-being. Beyond lifestyle, you also see diet. You also see relationships, the kind of people that you relate with. Right? These days, they say on social media they use jokes like "bad energy, stay away," and that's the truth. Bad energy can actually trigger a mental health breakdown. And what is a bad energy? A bad energy could be a toxic relationship. A bad energy could be somebody who makes you feel negative about yourself, who probably in an experience of gaslighting or emotional abuse. Those could be a sort of bad energy that can affect the person's mental well-being. Interacting with people, we're social beings. And so, we all need to interact from time to time. Now, some people need more social interaction than others. Because of their personality, but that also is a significant factor. Employment as well is also a significant factor that could contribute to your well-being. But I always encourage people to do some of those things that I'll mention. So number one would be pay attention to what you eat, pay attention to your diet, pay attention to exercise. That's very important because exercise promotes your mental well-being, and not just your mental well-being, even your physical well-being. We've seen exercise even help people with obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, and including mental illnesses. So exercise is great. You also need to manage your expectations. A simple joke would be if I wanted to buy a house in Banana Island, but I have less than $1 million in my account, by this time of the year, I should start to reconsider that, right?
No, you can just go to Plantain Island. Maybe you have something cheaper. But there's something that you mentioned here that I thought is important to give a little more attention to. Yeah. Some people need to be in company more than others.
Yeah.
You said something like that, right?
Yes, I did.
How healthy is that? Because generally, there are those who say you only open yourself to disappointment to the degree or to the level of the number of people that you depend on.
So that probably would be a quote from an introvert, right? Well, but the truth is, we all have different personalities and different forms of managing our energy. A typical introvert would manage their energy by spending time alone, right? So they want to just spend time in the room, just take a nap and watch movies alone. And that's how they actually manage their energy or manage stress. An extrovert, on the other hand, will probably want to go to the club, go to a party. Today is Saturday, go to Owambe. And that's what, helps them manage their mental health or manage their energy. So we all have different ways we manage our energy. And I think for us, the most important thing is understanding that your response is unique to you, and there's nothing wrong with the way you manage your energy or the way you manage your mental well-being. So if you need two close people that you can depend on, and that works for you, great. go ahead. But if you feel that you need a lot of friends in your life and that works for you, again, please go ahead. Again, it all depends on you and what works for you.
But what might be a little scary there is looking out for people's validation to the degree that if you do not get it, it begins to rub off negatively on you. What would you call that?
So I would say that that could just be some sense of insecurity. It could also translate to some perception, what I call negative perception of self, right, or self-worth. Now, some people actually are developed that way. Their experiences over time make them begin to depend on other people to get validated. Some others don't need that, right? And some people call that a low self-esteem, although I might disagree, but that could just be it as well. So it's the inadequacy, the feeling of inadequacy, where you then think that you need other people to validate who you are. Yeah. Now, the dangers of that is that you're likely going to find yourself in company of people who negatively affect you. And the fact that they give you negative feedback about yourself doesn't make it true. I joke about the fact that when I was younger, my friends used to make fun of me that I had pink lips, right? And they would say that I was a vampire because I had pink lips. Now, years later, I realized that people were paying to get pink lips. So if I'd listened to them and said, oh, you know what, I'm not good enough because they said I'm not good enough, that would actually affect my security, my perception of myself.
Yeah.
Exactly. So people could have their opinion, but their opinion is not fact and is not necessarily the judgment.
Oh, Dr. Chris Aboje, we haven't even started discussing this matter at all.
And the time has gone.
And our time is up already. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Dr. Chris Aboje, consultant clinical psychologist and international employee assistance program consultant and trainer. Thank you very much. Without a doubt, Dr. Chris, we're going to have to bring you back because we still have so many questions to ask you. Because mental health is, it's so important. It governs your physical health as well. So there's so much more we want to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
So thank you for staying with us. We're reaching that point now, that good part where we call the home stretch. See you in just a bit.
See the ratio, the beef self na me do, whether na asu them relate to. So bring your own crayfish, we go mix so, oh Lord. Oh, share them talk say we no go blow. Oh, share them they see us now, we don't dey glow. Take a look at me now, take a look at me now. Running things in this town, can't you see?
I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you do. Just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up on it. Bring it on, bring it on.
Are you ready? Ready?
No matter how you try, don't you ever fall. Keep your head up high and standing tall. Bring it on, bring it on.
Are you ready?
Try, don't you ever fall. Keep your head up high and standing tall.
And rising, rising, rising. Keep it high, rising, rise.
Bring it on.
This life is not easy. So much hustling and bustling. Everyone is struggling. So make you know they believe, say, since everyone is chasing, you're never gonna make it. Never say no, never give up. Keep your head up, standing tall. And for sure, you go turn it up, turn down for what? Shana them talk say, we no go blow. Share them they see us now, we don't dey glow. Take a look at me now, take a look at me now. We're running things in this town. Can't you see?
I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you do. Just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up on it. Bring it on, bring it on.
Are you ready? Ready?
No matter how you try, don't you ever fall. Keep your head up high and standing tall. Bring it on, bring it on.
Are you ready? Ready?
No matter how you try, don't you ever fall. Keep your head up high and standing tall.
And rise, rise, rise. Keep it high, rise, rise.
I don't care who you are, where you're from, or what you do. Just as long as you're chasing money, do what's right, never give up on it. Bring it on, bring it on. Are you ready?
Okay, it's that time of the day where we have the home stretch, and I can see that you're enjoying some things on your phone, which is good. It's technology. The way you listen to music these days.
Yes.
I saw a music clip, a video clip recently. Well, in the course of the week, someone just was, cataloging those devices we used back in time. Started with pushing the button for a channel on television, then open the cassettes, and then slotted it in the
tape.
machine, and the cartridge and video, VHS, cassette, and all those things. Those days are since gone. That's why your phone can do everything now.
Yes, it can.
Our guest is someone who has also undulated between technologies to be a part of a conversation this morning. His full name is Segun Tosin Odeyemi, but guess what his name is? Stage name, STO.
His initials, actually.
That's his stage name. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me here this morning.
You are a music producer, and you are also a very talented music artist yourself, with more than 10 years in music production, jingles production, a soundtrack for movies, and all these things. You have been around for a little bit.
Yes, actually.
Let me begin with this one. We have been told that.
Go, sorry, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We have been told
Straight face.
that music artists are eccentric. So when a producer has to work with them, the first thing to manage is not the song, it's their eccentricity. I can see that you are nodding your head. Is that in agreement?
Please see who is talking. He's in broadcasting, and in almost every broadcast station, you will see a sign somewhere that says, you don't have to be mad to work here, but it helps.
Alero, he is not a broadcaster right now. He is a music producer. So let me talk to him as a guest on my program.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Anchor. Please, Mr. Musician.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you mad?
No, I'm not.
That's the question he just asked you. Are you
No,
mad?
no.
I'm not.
Eccentric, not mad. Eccentric. Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Dr. Aboje.
Okay. Okay, so what would you want me to answer, sir?
I just asked that.
No,
you have to
eccentric.
manage the eccentricities before you manage.
So, manji where he shele konko.
Not really. So I think I've been lucky enough to work with good people who don't carry their whatsoever it is, the fame. They don't carry it on their heads. So
Give me examples of those artists.
I've worked with Mr. P of P Square. I've worked with Olamide. I've worked with Lamborghini, Rugged Man. These guys are.
And you want to tell me that Rugged Man doesn't have a little bit?
No.
Mr. P doesn't have a little bit.
Usually there are some.
Olamide doesn't have a little bit.
So the thing is, these artists, they respect us, especially when you know your craft as a producer. So when they come to you, they listen to you most of the time, even if they try to probably, raise their shoulders outside. When they come to the studio, they are humble.
Okay, you've spoken about the artists you've worked with, but you are also part musician. So what about you?
Okay, so
Well.
I'm actually very humble. I don't carry.
He didn't ask if you were humble.
So I'm not eccentric.
Eh?
No, I'm not. I'm cool-headed.
And you are succeeding in the industry. There's something wrong.
I have God.
Okay, you have God, right?
Okay.
Please tell me one thing God does that is normal. Okay, now the
He's
chicken has
thinking.
it.
I can see your
That is
brain.
normal. I think it keeps us in check and it keeps us humble.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so
That jingle
yeah.
that I'm reading about here.
Don't go there. The very first one, don't go there yet.
Okay, all right. Sorry.
In
Sorry.
the interest of peace and stability.
Okay.
You may want to go there eventually, but not right now. Because the only one that some will remember is the one of 1993. And by the way, I know the artist that produced that one as well.
Wow.
MKO's jingle.
MKO.
Yes.
He's our man, no?
Yes, the guy is in London now.
That was fantastic.
Okay. But music in Nigeria has moved. You produce the music that become music videos. We won't talk to you about the music videos now, but you know, one of the things that a number of people have said about music production these days, you may want to educate us, is that it has transited quite a lot. It's really not so easy to keep pace or track these days. Before you know what is happening, I mean, back in time, Alero, a hit song will still be around for maybe like 2 months, 5 months, and all. But today, you're like,
Will o' the Wisp.
2 weeks, it's gone.
If he's lucky.
True.
If he's lucky.
Why is that?
Well, Buga is still making waves. Everybody is still bugaing.
I mean, it's interesting. Michael Jackson's songs are still hits after how many years? So, what,
Decades.
in your opinion, is responsible for that, such that a hit track today, before you know what is happening?
Okay, so I think one of the reasons is social media. And social media has its own good and it has its own, downside, which is people tend to gravitate towards what is next. So that our attention span these days is not compared to
Very
what
short.
it used to be.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
short. What is happening on TikTok? Everybody is trying to, move into the next rave of the moment and all of that. So I think that also kills our longevity of
Attention
But,
span.
attention span.
are hit pieces coming out that fast?
So, Ma? What is it?
Are hit pieces
Hit
coming out
songs.
that fast? Hit songs?
Yes, I think some new guys are actually very hungry these days. And then because, the music right now is a game of number, so people tend to churn out materials weekly so that they can get more money. Because the more materials you put out, the more money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So there are two major components that make up a song.
Yeah.
There is the instrumentation or percussion,
Yeah.
and then there is the lyrics
Yes.
and the melody of the music.
Yes.
Now, I would like you to help us understand. She gave the example of Kiss Daniel's Buga.
Bigger, yes.
What people remember more about the song are the lyrics
Yes.
and the melody of it. Mfune Ibago by Two-Face. What I love about it is the percussionary, the music of it. And a number of people will remember Sweetest Taboo, and they will only remember the percussions, and on and on and on like that. So, what are the things that make producers come up with the kind of percussion or movements to a song that makes it become the hits that they become?
Okay, so first and foremost, the truth is for every composition, lyrically, there has to be the music because sometimes the music helps the composition stay,
On the minds of people.
yeah, actually. So the truth is you can't just have an a cappella. You can't have Buga sang and without the music and you think people will dance, people won't dance. So the inspiration that a producer probably comes up with from maybe his background in music or maybe from listening to the artist sometimes helps, making those percussions, soundtracks. And the truth is sometimes we don't even know what we're doing sometimes.
Oh, really?
That's the truth. Yes. Sometimes we are just connecting the dots, little by little, little by little.
Adding this, adding that.
And then it
Yes.
turns out to be something.
Yes.
To buttress your point, I remember one song, and I always give that as example of, okay, let me not use the word I'm thinking.
You mean the word eccentric?
No, not that one. This song, Alaji, Alaji. I mean, that is what it says from beginning to end.
True.
But it's danceable. People love to listen to it. And I just ask myself, are we getting crazy? Or is the musician crazy? Is this supposed to be a song?
There's another one like that. I don't know how many bars does that part of the song alone have. Perhaps even half of the entire song, if not more. Chop banana till you go, you. That's what you will hear over and over and over and over. And I'm wondering...
And the boys are making their money.
So what is it? So there's those who have said, it's just laziness.
Not really. Repetition sometimes does it. When you repeat it over and over,
people are
allergy, it just sticks.
That's it.
Compared to songs where you have so many lyrics, people, especially in this age, trust me, just give us something short, something bugaye, keep it running over and over.
But then the challenge to that is, and I'll put it to you, You're young and growing in the industry, and you've worked with some of the biggest names in contemporary Nigerian music. People are looking out that this generation will also begin to influence lives through music. There are those who will always reference, okay, for instance, in contemporary times, Power of Naija by Two-Face, some of the songs that Falz has out, and this one that we have even played today by Simi, that featured Chief Commander Ebenezer Obey, just admonishing people and all of that. So conscious music, essentially. I don't know. It seems conscious music doesn't have that kind of
impact,
impact or attention span or followership.
It doesn't. So I think that when I started, I said social media. So people want to listen to something to just make them happy on the go, and let's just go. So the truth is, some of those songs that have deeper meanings, they take time for people to, especially in this age, everybody's in a haste. Give me something short and let me go.
Haste to do what?
So what you're saying is that they're listening more to the rhythm than to the lyrics.
Actually.
The rhythm is more important.
Yes. So the truth is, the lyrics also comes and, of course, makes it all like a song. Yes. But the music itself is what really drives that buzz and everything people are.
Let me confirm that, Alero. My daughter, we were having a conversation one day. I said, there's this, she was listening to Ray J's I Like the Way You Lie. And she was just singing the song. She loves the sound of her voice. And I say, pause. Are you listening to the song that you're singing? I say, yeah, I'm singing it. So what's the song saying? That was the first time she was paying attention to the lyrics. How can you like the way somebody lies?
Eh?
How? And it's a beautiful rhythm, by the way. Beautiful percussion, beautiful movement to the song. Very lovely, lovely song. But the lyrics...
What actually catches your attention first as a listener is the music.
Is that saying, STO, that music is not functional beyond just giving people good feelings?
Pleasure.
No, so there are genres of music, but it's just that this age, we just want happy music.
Instant fix.
So there are conscious sounds, there are conscious music. But people, maybe it is when they are not feeling too happy, that's when they want to listen to those songs. But in this age, there is already that tense atmosphere. So nobody wants to listen to something that will make them start thinking that, this song. So everybody just wants to be happy. Low, 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 low. It's just easy. There's nothing really in that song, but the fact that it's just a happy song. you know.
It's a happy song.
So-
So any musician who is not doing happy songs
Happy song,
now,
trust me, they might not really stream your songs that much.
Oh, interesting. Now, what are the things that you would reference as the challenges of the music producer in Nigeria, at least from your own perspective?
Feedback from monetary feedback.
Naira and Kobo.
Yeah, actually, because the truth is, we make these songs, we make them sound so good. The artist takes it out and then starts getting the money, and nothing is being said to the producer as regards, okay, this is.
But you had a contractual agreement.
Okay, so in this age, we are getting more informed with the contract and all of those things. So producers are more deliberate with their decisions these days. Some 7-10 years ago, it used to be just come, let's just do something. But now that we've seen that these guys are making money, let me also tap into this. Okay, so let's draft out a contract, you know. So the challenge is, or one of the challenges is that the response in terms of the monetary aspect, and then sometimes you don't even get the accolade. You don't even get the credit. Sometimes, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, sometimes.
You don't get credit for the music you
For the
produce.
music, yeah. There are some songs that you have to probably go to make extra research to know who actually produced the song. Do you know right now, I don't know who produced that song we've been making reference to.
Okay.
Till now, you know.
Yeah. You do jingles as well. Do you
Yes.
produce them, or do you
Compose the songs.
compose them, or what? Are they more difficult than music, for instance? You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
A jingle and a piece of music.
So,
Which is more difficult?
No, none of it is actually really easy. So because you have to take time you have to be deliberate with what you're writing. So if you want it to be happy, be deliberate about it. So for jingles, you have to look
Which are
at
just like 30 seconds.
30
40,
seconds.
And
It has
you've got
be
to get your
catchy,
message across
very
in 30
catchy.
seconds.
So you have to look at what can sell. What can people listen to in the first 1 to 5 seconds and catch their attention? Those are the lines you're looking for. So it's quite, a bit harder for jingle because of the time frame compared to a song that is like 3 minutes,
3 minutes.
because there is so much time to enjoy. But
Get your
one
music,
minute,
your
1 minute song,
message.
1 minute jingle or 30 seconds, you have to be on your, on your feet and get it done.
Okay, so what do you wish to see in the music industry, especially music production, within the shortest possible time that will be sustainable?
Not to be selfish as being a producer, because it will seem as if I'm just favoring myself, because
It's natural.
Yeah, you know, I think that the artists should do more. They should do better. They should do better by with this contract, because there's this awareness and all of those things that we are trying to, showcase. They should not take it as this is a stress on me. They should embrace it and then let us work together.
I guess that only speaks to one thing. You need to ramp up on that contract part of the conversation.
I agree.
Segun Tosin Odeyemi is a producer, music producer, artist, and all. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for staying with us this Saturday morning, spending all your morning with us. Thank you. We'll be with you again next Saturday to bring you a fresh edition. I am Alero Edu, wishing you all the best and saying, see you next month.
If you are in traffic, sincere apologies. Just be patient. I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.